Jackson. Um, we can talk about it. I do think it's a good conversation. I think what the Ravens did today, placing the non-exclusive tag on Lamar Jackson, was very interesting. And then, of course, there was the entire aspect of so many quarterback needy teams, Larry, that I thought that if you put Lamar Jackson on those teams, it completely changes the entire direction of their franchise. Seem to say that they aren't interested. There were a few people that were tweeting a little bit about some conspiracy theories about, the league colluding a little bit against Lamar Jackson to try and not make these guaranteed contracts a thing. It does seem a little bit fishy, but we're not here to talk about the league and all of that. We're here to talk about the 49ers. Obviously, Lamar Jackson would make this team so much better. He's a special football player, and he's actually an exceptional fit into what Shanahan is doing on offense, and his skill set completely fits it. The big thing would be that if the 49ers were able to acquire Lamar Jackson using the format of the Ravens without doing a sign-in trade, they would have to wait after the draft when they have both their first-round picks, and then they would have to give up their 2 picks, right? 24 and in first-round pick in 24, first-round pick in 25, and then ultimately make the big move to get Lamar. What do you think of all this? Do you even think it's possible? It's really not possible, is it? Or probable?
I don't see it. I don't see it. I mean, um, you know, first of all, what happened today is the Ravens placed the non-exclusive franchise tag on him. And that just means that he can negotiate with other teams and then he'll be guaranteed 32.4 million in salary.
Right.
And then the Ravens have the ability to match any offer that he gets, or if they don't get if they decide not to match, they get 2 first round picks.
Right.
So, it's definitely not the traditional route. I'm shocked that Ozzie Newsome and Eric DeCosta couldn't work this out. This is their franchise quarterback. Their head coach is on record as saying he wants Lamar. So Lamar, I don't believe is going anywhere. That's too rich of a price tag. You're going to have to satisfy the Ravens, Lamar in a contract. You're going to have to satisfy the Ravens in a deal, or if you can't, you're going to have to cough up 2 number ones. And then you got to look at Lamar, the player. And Lamar, the player I don't know what his future is. I mean, he sure looked a whole lot better in 2019 and 2020 than he has the last couple of years. That's for sure. His completion percentage has gone down, 3 years in a row or whatever it is. His completion percentage has gone down. His touchdown to interception ratio in 2019 was 36-6. That fell to 26-9 in 2020, 16-13 in 2021. He only slightly rebounded last year with 17-7. I mean, I like him, but he is a quarterback that does run a lot. He's a brilliant runner. But I just don't. He had an incredible MVP year in 2019, but I don't see him as the same quarterback the last couple of years, and I'd be really hesitant to pay him huge money long term when running is a big part of his game plan. And as he ages, that probably is something he probably becomes less dynamic as a runner. So I've got concerns over whether Lamar is somebody that is I know the bottom line is he is a very good NFL quarterback. Is he an elite quarterback? Is he a great quarterback? I don't know. I don't know about that. 13-2 season in 2019. He looked awesome. Since that point, the Ravens still have good talent, but his numbers have gone down. I'd like to hear some theories as to why. And also his sacks have gone up. He's been sacked a lot. How does a guy who moves this well sack 38 times? He's been sacked almost over 60 times in the last 2 years combined.
So they've had some major issues in their offensive line, right? To give context to that, right? Ronnie Stanley has been battling injuries for just about 3 years now. They had to let Orlando Brown walk. He was a good player. Marshall Yanda retired. So those are 3 guys that, have made Pro Bowls and all pros as offensive linemen that have walked. The Ravens are 32nd in the league in terms of cap spent on offense. That's including Lamar Jackson. 32nd in the league. Um,
who's his number one receiver?
Rashad
Rashad
Bateman,
Bateman?
who they picked in the
Yeah,
first round, who's hurt, right?
he hasn't
And then
flourished.
and then there's also Krug. You're all too familiar with one of the great run game coordinators in the NFL, but his pass game, and that's when Greg Roman is a
He's
little
out.
bit of a mess. A lot of right, but in terms of the last 3 years, he was the
Yeah.
coordinator, right? The run game is phenomenal. It's as creative as it gets. The way they use the multiple tight ends, the way they move pull guards, all of it. It's creative. The way they implement the quarterback run game, it's fantastic. They always have a good game plan with it. Pass game though, Krug, um, lots of receivers in the same spot. If you go back and watch, happens a lot with their offense. Sometimes it doesn't even feel like you know what they're actually trying to do on a certain pass play. Like, you know, like when you're watching like a pass play out, right, Krug, you can see like, okay, this is what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to clear out, right? See what the offense
You're glitching a little bit.
lose me or did I lose you? Are we
I thought
back?
you were glitching. I was listening to you, but
So I glitched.
I
Okay, perfect.
think
I glitched. I wasn't sure. Where did I glitch? Because I that kind of that was
just
yeah,
in
unfortunate.
that last three sentences.
Okay, perfect. Well, anyway, I was talking about Lamar and the pass game with Greg Roman. A lot of people in the same spot, issues with their pass game scheme. But you're right. Lamar also, I would say this year, I thought he played very, very well. I thought last year was one of his tougher years. Earlier in the season, he was really, really hot throwing the football last year, right? He had that incredible Monday night game against the Colts where I think he completed 38 passes and he was unreal throwing the football. But besides that, really, I mean, it was a rough season for him. He turned the football over a lot. But overall, Larry, I do think he is, on the precipice or on the cusp of being one of those elite guys, right? If you take Mahomes out of the conversation and you take possibly Allen and Burrow, gosh, you could probably argue Lamar Jackson in some capacity against anybody else. There's a few other guys I might take over him. Definitely Justin Herbert. Maybe a Jalen Hurts. I'm not sure, but the point is he is on the precipice of being a top 5, top 4, top 3 quarterback. So he's still I would say well into the top 10 as a quarterback. I know there's some disagreement and pushback. I find some of the stuff on Lamar's game to be a little bit I don't want to say I would say some of the criticism is generalized and not necessarily well researched or not necessarily fair to what his skill set is and who his supporting cast is. Overall, though, in terms of Lamar to the 49ers, Larry, I think it would be a home run, but it just doesn't make sense, right? Doesn't make sense from a contract standpoint. The 49ers have talked so much about wanting this rookie quarterback window. They've paid so many different players on this football team. Sure, if they got Lamar Jackson tomorrow, Larry, like if it was possible in terms of resources and assets, like I think Kyle Shanahan and Lamar Jackson would be a dynamo duo. Like I think it would be awesome. I think it would be fireworks for the NFL. I think it would be all kinds of special, but I just don't think it's likely to happen. And as much as this discussion is fun and we can get into the weeds of Lamar and kind of the dichotomy he causes amongst NFL fans, right? Because there's a lot of differing opinions on how good he really is. But ultimately for the 49ers, Larry, I'm not sure if that one really, really makes sense or works as good as he is.
I mean, he hasn't done it in the playoffs. I mean, he's 1-3 in the playoffs, completed 55% of his passes, 3 touchdowns, 5 picks.
Hmm.
So those are not great playoff numbers at all.
Right.
So can he lead you through the playoffs? I don't know. I don't know. He's a dynamic runner. I think part of the issue is the surrounding cast. These are his receivers: Devin Duvernay, Demarcus Robinson,
Oof.
Rashad Bateman, Sammy Watkins, Tylan Wallace, James Prochet. There's not a big time receiver in the bunch. You know, that's not a that's
There's
not
not
now he's
even a
got
number
Mark
two receiver
Andrews.
in there.
He's got Josh Oliver, Mark Andrews, and Isaiah Likely. He's got some good tight ends, and they run the
Right.
ball. It's a run offense. It's a run based offense, and I think at times when you have Lamar's dynamic ability on third down, if you can build a dominant run game and a good defense, I think the Ravens are a legitimate Super Bowl contender. But you got to have some to have a dominant run game. You have to have the threat of a pass game, and they have no threat of a pass game. And then Lamar's got to still prove it yet in the playoffs. So, to me, he's not a lock. I mean, he's had some really great statistical seasons, but as far as championship caliber quarterback, he's he's got one playoff win, and he's 1-3.
Yeah, I do think the 1-3, the one loss that's glaring, right, is the year they were 14-2, and he didn't play well against Tennessee. Now they didn't play well as a football team, right? Earl Thomas not tackling Derrick Henry was pretty pathetic in that game, but he didn't play
And we
well.
could
But if you
debate
go
about
back,
the quarterback. I mean, I'm not one that subscribes to the theory that the quarterback is the record and the record is the quarterback.
right,
It's a team game. But if we're gonna sit there and allow people to be like Shanahan was 9-29, or and
yeah,
Jimmy
yeah, no,
Garoppolo is this record and that record. If we're gonna do that when guys are good, you got to do it when they're bad too. I mean, it's either a
no,
useful stat
100%.
or it ain't.
100%. And I do think with Lamar, the only reason I bring up the playoffs is because to me, it's a little more nuanced conversation. I understand what you're saying, right? The ultimately, as Bill Parcells once said, you are what your record says what you
Right.
are. But I do think when you go back, right, the first playoff game was him as a rookie against a Chargers team that had no business being in the wild card, right? They were a 12-4 football team. They beat the Chiefs twice that year. Phillip Rivers, that was one of the best seasons of his career. Unfortunately, they lost to New England. They got obliterated because they didn't have a single linebacker healthy the next week, but they had a good plan and they stopped Lamar Jackson. Then the next year, yes, I agree. He didn't play well against Tennessee. But then if you look at the next playoffs, which is where his other two starts come, right? They beat Tennessee in the wild card. He played very well. And then they lost to Buffalo in the divisional round. He threw a pick six, but that game was a little bit back and forth. The pick six, obviously, you can't do that, can't have it. But I do think the Ravens haven't necessarily supported him as adequately on offense. And I keep going back to, right, Larry,
No
they
doubt.
spent the least money on offense in the NFL with Lamar Jackson at quarterback. They're basically, a lot of their offense is, hey, Lamar Jackson, save us. And I do think when we're talking about as a passer, you're right, the passing offense wasn't good. I don't necessarily put that on Lamar as much. I do think Lamar has some culpability, right? Passing offense is not good. You do have to talk about the quarterback, but there's more than just the quarterback here. I do think it was a coordinator issue. I don't think Greg Roman is very good at scheming up the pass game. If we had time and if I had the patience, I can go back and clip up from any season, any game, pass plays where, hey, I can show you the concept Baltimore's running and five guys, or they got three guys running routes and all guys are in the exact same spot. And you tell me where he's supposed to throw the ball. I don't know. I don't know. But that's even besides the point. So I do think that there's a little bit there. And then you brought up the other point, right? Like Hollywood Brown was a pretty good player. He was not a number one receiver. They actually stole, I thought, a first round pick from him from Arizona. And I think they used that first round pick on Linderbaum, by the way. So that's a dynamo first round pick because
Smart.
that dude's a superstar. And then otherwise, they've had what? Bateman. He struggled to stay healthy. Maybe I didn't like him so much before the draft, but I
He
know a lot
doesn't
of
really
people
gain a lot
did,
of
and he's got the
separation.
potential. True,
He doesn't
true,
really
but
separate.
he does have the potential to be a good player if he had consistency of being healthy, right? Just a first round pick.
Lamar's got talent. I mean, there's no question. He's 45-16. He's had the monster year. He's, career 64%. Some are better, some are worse. 101 touchdowns, 38 picks. He's only 26. It's just
Right.
that he's a quarterback who's a super dynamic runner. And now he's entering the middle part of his career where he's no longer on a rookie deal. Now you got to pay him big money. And when you think about the combination of he's had injuries, you got to pay him huge money now. He's a running quarterback who's getting older, who hasn't done it in the playoffs, to me, the cost in dollars and assets to acquire him, and the questions that still exist, I I, I would pass. I
Really?
think Lamar is a dynamic player, but I gotta think that a quarterback who runs like he does, and it's such a big part of what he does, and his value proposition is running. As he gets closer to 30, I think that he becomes a lot less dynamic.
I think he plays well enough from the pocket that there is going to be a longevity to it. He's played in a pro style offense since his second year at Louisville. And one of the always things that's been misinformation spread about Lamar Jackson is that he's somehow this off schedule player that's looking to run. The only time he really did that was his rookie year. Besides then, he's always looked to play quarterback from the pocket, and he's got a very, very quick release. He's very accurate, short and intermediate over the middle of the field. He's very good in the quick game. He's not the greatest down the field thrower, though I thought he improved in that. He's not the greatest thrower outside the numbers, though I thought he improved in that this year as well. I do think, Larry, ultimately, I agree with you in terms of if we're talking 49ers perspective, I think you're right. It may not make sense.
Well,
Although,
they have
God,
Brock Purdy and Trey Lance. So it's
right,
like they're
right.
they're already
And they don't want
somewhat
to spend
committing
money on
to
the
their
quarterback.
right.
They don't want
And
to spend
their
money on the
whole
quarterback.
yeah, they're set up to not
That's not their
spend.
team building direction.
And they don't have
But
picks.
but if you're asking me, hey, this is an opportunity to get a guy who I view as a top 6, 7, 8, somewhere in there quarterback in the NFL. I think that's where the conversation is a little bit more difficult because it's hard to get one of those guys, let alone at 26 years old, let alone with the track record Lamar Jackson has. I understand, Larry, there's a couple more things he needs to prove to you, but not many guys have 4 years, 5 years straight of good production while being a starting quarterback in the league. I mean, if we want to go to the wins, they win basically every regular season Lamar Jackson plays, right? They were
Lamar
even
ain't going.
last
I
year
don't
when they
think
didn't make
Lamar's
the
going
playoffs. They
anywhere.
were 7-3, or
I don't think he's
with
going
Lamar
anywhere.
Jackson.
I think
You
he's
think he's
staying in
staying in
Baltimore.
Baltimore?
Yeah, I do.
Interesting.
But also even if he wasn't going to stay in Baltimore, it takes a certain type situation for this to work out. You have to have cap room. You have to have assets as far as draft picks. If you don't have the combination of the cap room and the draft capital, probably doesn't work. If you obviously have to have a need at quarterback. So now that's down to, not, I mean, anybody could upgrade to Lamar, and there's many guys that, are probably he's better than, but is their team going to get rid of their starter to upgrade, a couple spots? Probably not. So it's really,
Right.
you look at the teams that have no quarterbacks, and then how many of them have cap room? How many of them, I think also going with Lamar, you got to have a ready, a team that's ready to roll.
Right.
You don't want to trade for Lamar and then have him develop a young team and want
Yeah.
to, have him play his best football in 3 years. I think you want to have a team that's ready to win, that just needs to climb the mountain. So in that regard, he would be a good fit for the Niners because they are at the right stage
Yeah.
of their, whatever you want to call it, going for itness, that it makes sense for Lamar. But then they have Purdy on a rookie deal, and they got Lamar on a rookie, and they got Trey on a rookie deal, and they're looking to sign Bosa and Ayuk, and their whole plan was to operate on
Right.
a rookie contract quarterback.
And that's where I think you make the golden point, right? If we're talking from a 49ers perspective, if they could get Lamar Jackson on the tag, 1 year, $32 million, and you can find a way to just fit him in this year, it's a home run, right? You feel like you get a guy who's a stud, top 10 quarterback in the league, and you put him with the most talent, right? Impulsive here. Appreciate the donation, shares with us. LJ, Lamar Jackson is carrying a team of turds. Now, I don't think that's necessarily true. I do
That's not
think
true.
Baltimore
They
has a
had the
lot of
most
great
Pro Bowlers.
infrastructure. Right.
Didn't they have the most
Great
Pro
defense.
Bowlers 2 years ago? I think
In 2019, they had the most Pro Bowlers.
there's a lot of good talent on that team. Come on.
There is. That's what I'm saying. I agree with you. There's a lot of good players, so I do think that. But in terms of offensive talent surrounding him, it would be a massive increase in San Francisco. I do think Baltimore's defense towards the end of the year, I mean, Niners defense was probably better last year, but Baltimore's defense towards the end of the year was a top 3, 4, 5-ish defense in the sport. They were phenomenal. In fact, if you put Lamar Jackson, I said this before the playoffs, you have a healthy Lamar Jackson on the 2023 Baltimore Ravens. They beat Cincinnati in the first round of the playoffs. They definitely go into Buffalo and beat Buffalo, and we'll see what happens with KC. Now, I don't know if they're a better overall team than Cincinnati. This year, they just had the matchup, and they had Cincinnati's number with the changeup, of course, with Mac McDonald, the Michigan defensive coordinator, playing a lot more zone, right? A lot more spot drop zone, a lot less